Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 267 Better on Draft Podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. We have been off for a few weeks, having a lot of fun. Went on a nice trip over to the Northeast Coast, but you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about what we're drinking today and a little bit about our guests. So I will start. And on my trip from the what looks like Moat Mountain Brewing Company in Mount Washington Valley, I've got a Bone Shaker Brown Ale. Bringing in my co-host, Rob. What do you got over there?
Right now, I am going to be sipping on some maple single barrel Detroit City Distillery bourbon. So
nothing like going hard on a Sunday afternoon. Wendy, what are you drinking?
Right. I too am. Well, I'm looking at City Built Brewing. I've got the. Gosh, I can't even talk this morning or this afternoon. The Ambrosia, which is their collaboration with Ascension Brewing. And I also decided to pull a Nick today, and I've got the peanut butter marshmallow Gorilla Juice from Ascension as well.
Well, I'm sure Nick is pulling a Nick right now, watching the Lions be the Lions this afternoon, week 1. So, we're ready to get hurt again. But in our virtual studio all the way across the pond, we have Mark Dredge. Let's start off really simple. Where are you from specifically, and what is it that you do that makes you relevant into the beer world?
So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Mark Dredge. I am a beer writer primarily. I've written 8 books about beer. I do beer education, beer presenting, things like that. Specifically, I am from East Kent, where East Kent Goldings grow the greatest hop in the world. And I'm currently in a town called Eastbourne, which is on the south coast of England, right by the sea. So my girlfriend and I, we used to live in East London, so we're in London for years, and we moved to the seaside a few months ago. Kind of a nice consequence of COVID means I now have a sea view.
What are some of the books you have written and written about?
So for me, I like to focus on travel. I certainly did that initially. So a book of mine, which has done really well and continues to do really well, is called The Beer Bucket List. So essentially for this, I mean, the title kind of tells you what you need to know, but I was thinking, how can I get paid to travel the world and drink beer, and do a bit of work as well. So I came up with the idea of the Beer Bucket List. So it's sort of the experiences, the places you need to go. If you love beer, these are the kind of a collection of things that you should try out. Done a few beer and food books. It was beer and food actually that got me into beer in the first place. So I love the idea and the potential of beer with food together, kind of socially, culturally, and just the pleasure of them. So I just actually wrote a book about beer and vegetarian and vegan food. If you think about beer and food pairing in general, it's like, what's the meat protein first, and then how do we pair a beer to it? So I was like, I don't eat meat anymore. I'm a vegetarian, mostly a vegan. So I wanted to write something that better suited that. I've written a book about the history of lager, so a nice narrative history about lager. And I've got a new book out soon called Craft Beer World, The New Craft Beer World. So it's kind of a general guide to beer around the world.
Yep, your publisher actually gave us a sneak peek into that book, so we'll have some questions about that book upcoming. But I wanna go back to this because you have a lot of books that, what I like to say, they're more what we call coffee table books. So they're great to hop in, look at a couple pages, and kind of do that over the course of time, because it's not like a story start to finish. You talk about different pairings, different beers, different styles. How do you stay on top of the ever-changing world that is craft beer? Because craft breweries go out of business, craft breweries discontinue beers, and that's, especially with such a high craft beer culture in the United States versus the rest of the world, how are you managing the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's impossible, frankly. As much as I try to, it simply can't be done. There are so many breweries now. And it's just physically impossible to keep up to date with all of that. I just do my best to read as widely as I can, speak to people, drink as much as I can, particularly when I'm traveling. And for me, traveling is the most important thing that I can do. It's the thing that I've missed the most actually for the last couple of years, is that inability to actually go out there and experience things. Like, it's all very well reading online, oh, these are some great new beers out, but like, to me, that doesn't really mean that much. Like, I want to be out there. I want to be in the brew pubs. I want to be in the region where people are drinking these localized styles, and I want to be trying that. So yeah, it's a really great question. And the answer is, I just have to travel and try and drink as much as possible.
Now, I think I'm not sure if Ken had asked, because we went through us what we're drinking, but we didn't get to what you're drinking.
So yeah, I'm drinking alcohol-free beer. I love alcohol-free beer at the moment. And I'm drinking a beer called Lucky Saint, which I really love. I drink a few bottles of this every week. For me, beer is brilliant. It's the greatest drink in the world, but I can't drink it every single day, all day. So actually, the UK is brilliant for alcohol-free beer now. And I've been really enjoying drinking through the whole range of different styles. I've got an alcohol-free double IPA in my fridge right now. And I was like, well, I can do double IPA, an alcohol-free beer. So it's like, to me, it's a really exciting new or growing category.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned in an article that obviously with not only with the Lucky Saint, but the Duvel are two beers that normally stay equipped in your refrigerator. But I guess going on with the Lucky Saint, and with that, NA beers are pretty much, have, I guess you would say, taken hold in a way in the UK. But they've definitely had an explosion here in the US. And I guess for us here, and is there a sense that NAs are going to sustain and grow in popularity? And is there something that is happening in the UK that you haven't seen the US do with NA beers that you'd like to see happen?
I'm actually behind on what's happening with NA beers in the US. So the last time I was there was 2 years ago now. And I either wasn't looking for NA beers or I just didn't see any. So I imagine it's, 2 years is a long time for things to change in craft beer. But for me, it really is an exciting development how we're getting so many more of these beers now. And I definitely think they're here to stay. For me, the thing that I love about beer is the social side of it. I drink beer with friends. I go out for a few pints, catch up. And that for me is the most enjoyable part about beer. But it doesn't necessarily matter what's in front of me when I'm with my friends, but I would rather that be a beer. And there's a lot of times now where I don't want to be drunk or don't want to be drinking too much. So it just gives me that extra option. It means that I've now got this. It's not really an alternative. It just means I've got an extra choice on the bar or behind the fridge. That means I'm still drinking a beer without having any of the potential negatives.
Right. Now, one thing that, in looking at the advanced copy that we had here, there was a thing that I know Ken and I have talked about in the past, and that, one of the complaints that we kind of have in the craft beer world, at least, for Ken and myself, is the seeming lack of variety of styles in beer. That we've got an ever-growing record number of breweries here in the United States. I believe I know we're over 8,000. I can't remember exactly where we are, over 8,000. But we have all of these breweries here, and there tends to be this surplus, so to speak, of IPAs and sours that all of these breweries tend to have. And I guess talk to us about, that, because you have that in the introduction in the new book. And I guess talk to us about what you would like to see in these breweries and in terms of variety and what they should offer to, I guess, broaden your horizons, so to speak.
Yeah. And, IPAs have just taken over everywhere. They are everywhere. In the UK as well, I can't walk into a pub now without seeing IPA on tap. Going to a brewery, they're going to have several hazy IPAs on tap. And specifically, it's hazy IPAs as well. For me, it's fine. I like that. But I certainly want more variety. I think what's interesting about the hazy IPAs taking over is that they seem to welcome a lot of people in. They have this accessibility to a lot of people. You know, this soft fruitiness, which is really pleasing. It's almost like juice. You know, a lot of people love that. So as much as we can talk about it being this intense, strong flavor, it's an intense, strong flavor that's really understandable. You know, if I say to someone, here, try this dunkel and notice, you know, the bread crust flavor and this, you know, the lightly roasted malt character. Or if I say, here's a double IPA, it smells like mangoes. People are like, oh yeah, shit, yeah, mangoes are delicious. So people understand that. But for me, you know, I love lager. I drink more lager than anything. And the whole category of lager, the whole, you know, family of lager, that is the first beer that I'm ordering if I walk into a brewery or a bar, just because that's the type of beer that I want. And I think more than anything, I like balance. Almost doesn't matter the style of beer. I favor this balance of flavors, whether it's a 10% triple IPA or a 3%, you know, grisette or something. Mm-hmm. For me, I like to see variety though. And I think we've never had more beer available to us, but I think we have probably never had more of the same beers, if that makes sense. So we've got so much variety, but there's almost a lack of diversity in the types of beer that we have. Right. So yeah, to answer your question, I think I would just like to see more breadth beyond the IPA.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, actually, Wendy, I wanted to do a quick follow-up before I hand it off to you. And just in terms of those varieties, do you think there's a lot of people that just get scared just by the style in the name alone? Because, I mean, we have an issue here where if someone sees English style bitter, then they just get away from it because they hear that bitter, despite the fact that that's what IPAs are. Do you see that with like just the names of beers and the names of the styles that people are just like, I'm not going to touch that just because I don't like the way that sounds?
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things that a lot of the regional brewers in the UK have done in the last few years is rebrand their bitter to an amber ale. So many brewers have actually done this. It's still the same beer. They just don't call it bitter anymore. It certainly has this old school reputation to it, almost like brown ales. You know, they've kind of lost this. I don't know if anyone really loved them in, you know, that much in the first place, but they don't have this like catch to them, do they? People don't like, oh wow, I really want to go and drink that.
Sorry, Mark, I'm going to interrupt you right here. And the reason why the other two are laughing is that I am 100% a brown ale connoisseur. I could, if I could judge only one contest, it'd probably be the brown ale itself. And especially because I could tell the differences between like an English and an American style brown ales because they're two totally different styles. But yes, I am the kind of person where if I'm walking into a bar and I see a brown ale, that's the first beer that I'm ordering. As much as I do have a new appreciation for pills and lagers and kolsches and the cleaner beers that you can't hide much behind. Yeah, I'm that guy. Sorry, you've met him now. He exists. But keep going. I'm sorry. I had to interrupt because of that.
Ken's face was priceless when you said that.
I think it's because I was listening to your podcast earlier, and you know there was mentions of brown ale, so that probably just got stuck in my head.
he was doing it to troll me.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to get back to the travel side because you were telling a story before we got on air about carrying your rucksack into Bell's, and man, I have been to many a brewery with my suitcase in hand, so I totally get that. What are some of the favorite places that you have been in your travels?
Good question. For me, traveling is the best thing about beer. You know, getting to explore and see new places.
Oh, there we go. Oh, you're back.
All right. Did you lose me then?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I'm still here. But yeah, no, for me, travel is the best thing about beer. It's the reason I'm still excited about beer, but it's to go somewhere new and just see what's there and run around. The last trip that I did to the US was I jumped around quite a lot, but I started up in Seattle, and it was the first time I've been to Seattle. Actually, I loved it. There was something really cool about, you know, the sea in the front, the mountains behind, these old hilly streets, and these cozy old brew pubs. And I really enjoyed that. Where else in the US would I pick out as being a favorite? I've been to San Francisco quite a few times. I do like the Bay Area and Northern California. So I guess the West Coast I kind of feel like slightly more drawn to. Chicago has been somewhere I've been quite a few times and always have a nice time there. Obviously based in Europe, I drink in Europe more often. I drink in Germany a lot, particularly when I was writing a book about lager. I was there frequently. Munich is just so much fun, but for me, Bamberg is, it's famous for Rauch beer, but I don't think it should be famous for Rauch beer, because that's one beer out of 100 beers in that town. And that is just a wonderful culture and a wonderful place to drink. For me, I think that if you say you could only go one place to go and have a beer now, I'll zap you there in a second. It would be Vietnam, actually. It's a quite surprising place. They've got a wonderful local drinking culture, kind of away from craft beer. So they've got their own ways of drinking, their own customs and cultures, but then they've got this ever-growing rise of craft beer, which is really good. So for me, it's one of those unexpected but brilliant places to visit.
That's awesome.
Good.
So, who were your inspirations for writing about beer around the world?
Oh, I've never been asked that question before. Who would be my inspirations? I think I'm often inspired by food. So I probably read as much about food as I do about beer. So it would be cooks, it would be chefs, and actually it would be as much looking at restaurants and looking at local cuisine as it would be about kind of reading other beer writers, something like that. Yeah, that's a good question. I need to think of a better answer for that one.
That's
So you told us a little bit about some of your favorite places. What is your favorite beer that you've ever had?
Oh, I've been asked this one before. And I still don't necessarily have the right or the easy answer for it. The beer that I go back to the most is Duvel, the Belgian beer. I just love that beer. For me, it's the perfect beer kind of any time, even though it's pretty strong. It's dry, it's crisp, it has that refreshment, but it also has that depth and that richness to it. But I think, beer's one of those things that's, you can't take it away from the drinking situation. So for me, Duvel is my beer at home because I know it's like a comfort thing almost. But to me, it's much more fun to drink, in different locations, different places, the local beer in a local place. Drinking Kolsch in Cologne, you can't beat that. I've never had a Kolsch outside of Cologne is even anywhere near as good as the ones there. Drinking a liter of Oktoberfest beer at Oktoberfest, like, again, that's incomparable. So for me, it's much more about drinking the local beer wherever you are, as opposed to being like, that's the one beer that I'm going to hold on this pedestal. I do remember though that when I first got into beer, actually this kind of links back to your previous question as well a little bit. When I first got into beer, like 10, 12 years ago, I was like, young, early 20s, like geeky about beer, like just wanted to try everything. And to me, the number one beer that I wanted to try more than anything else was Pliny the Elder. So I would sit at home and I'd be like, man, I really want to drink this beer. Like, I would read every review on Beer Advocate and things like that. I'd be like, oh God, it sounds so good. It sounds so good. And the first time I had a bit of money that I could spend on a beer trip, I went to San Francisco. So I booked into San Francisco. And that's a long way from England. Like, that's a long flight. So flew in the morning, flew, halfway across the world, landed. Like, my body clock was telling me it was 3 a.m. But I was on my way to a bar called the Toronado, like the famous beer bar in San Francisco. On my way to Toronado. I went in and I said, can I have a pint of Pliny, please? And it was just this remarkable experience. And I still remember it so warmly and so fondly today. Just the thrill of, one, being in the US and about to drink this beer, but just the environment, just the bar, just the sound, just everything about it. And then the way that this beer tasted, it was sort of everything that I'd ever read about it, everything I'd imagined about it. Here it was, and it stood up. It was every bit as good as I hoped it would be. So for me, again, that's a beer that really stands up there.
That's a thing that I think everyone in the craft beer industry, as fans of beer, is that they've hyped up a beer in their head, but so often when they've read about it or they've had it once before and went to have it again, it did not taste the same. It was different. It was, I always go back to probably the first time I ever had Leffe-Brune. It was at a bar out in Toronto, Ontario, and I loved it, and I couldn't find it in Michigan, and I had been talking it up in my head, and finally when I got a bottle of it, I'm like, I don't remember it. I remember it being so much better. And I don't know if that's because, for you, on top of all of the pressure that you put on Pliny the Elder just when you went to go get it, you had such an experience to remember because you went to a great bar, great atmosphere, great beer. Like it all culminated to this perfect story. Whereas I think a lot of us, and you may have experienced this too, is that we've had those experiences where you've clawed for that beer and it just never panned out the way you wanted it to. Like in your head, you had one idea and it was a completely different idea. But I'm glad you were able to get that Pliny and have that experience. Obviously, it's a lot easier to get it here in the U.S. between beer trades and stuff by just asking people to send it. But I want to ask you a question because you kind of brought it up in your last answer. And when you're writing a book and you're talking about beers that you have to try or, goal beers, bucket list beers, you're going to upset some people because you're not including X beer. How often do you get responses, whether it's a review on Amazon or a tweet or an Instagram message, because you missed a specific beer?
It's so hard. It's the thing which takes the longest when I'm like preparing a book like the Craft Beer World that's coming out. I've got about 400 beers to go in there. And let's say there's 15 IPAs. Let's say 15 American IPAs, and I want to cover the world. Like, how'd you do that? Like, how do you pick a representative sample that I consider to be really good, but also is not just, 13 beers from California and then 2 others. Like, it's about finding this. It's about finding this balance. So, and for me, that's almost the biggest stress with writing a book like this. And one of the things actually I've come to realize, particularly with these kinds of coffee table books, is that they don't age well, obviously. As soon as it's written, there's always new beers which could replace those. So more and more I'm falling back on the classic beers. I'm falling back on the ones which are well regarded, that have kind of have lasted several years. They're not just come out, they've been out for a year or so, or they're brand new beer out, and maybe they'll be here in 6 months, maybe they'll be here in 3 years. Who knows? I've now more and more fall back on the beers which are reliable, always going to be good, as opposed to almost searching for the most modern, most new, most exciting, most innovative thing. That works, and there's definitely places that you can publish content like that. But for me, a book is not the right place for that cutting edge of beer.
So speaking of not having specific beers in the book, especially IPAs. There is an IPA here in Michigan that just happens to not be in the book as an IPA. You've mentioned it all over the book, but you don't mention Bell's Two Hearted as an American IPA to try. So are you prepared for the Michigan fanboys to come after you? Not us. We're not coming after you. But I mean, you're taking a like the Zimmergy.com or Zimmergy book award-winning beer, multi-time award-winning beer, and not including it in your book.
Like you said, it's mentioned throughout. It just doesn't get its own little feature page. I think every other book that I've written, it's in there, like without a question, it's there, and it's not excluded because it's not as good as the others, or that it's not like it's number 16 on the list and I had to cut it. It's just finding that balance of what beers can go in and what beers have to be cut. Yeah.
Before I pass it off, because I want to bring up one more thing, and that is you mentioned about having a Kolsch in Cologne versus outside. How do you judge a beer that you know the proper way it's being made, but again, you say that you haven't found a good one, not a good one, like an amazing one, we'll say, like the top of the line, outside of Cologne. How do you put that into your book when you're trying to choose different Kolsches for your book?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of making a reference to that, saying this is the classic, this is how it is there, and perhaps this is how other brewers interpret it. Some brewers like to go unfiltered. Fine. Some brewers like to use maybe a light amount of American hops in it. Fine. And that's kind of the adaptation of the style. And, all styles are flexible, I think. Although Kolsch is a good example. For me, it's I would argue that it's the style that is the least flexible. To me, it's an incredibly defined beer style. And that is part of why I don't think I've ever had a perfect one outside of Cologne, because there is this sense of, okay, well, let's make it a bit stronger, or let's have it unfiltered, or let's dry hop it. All right, well, none of that is Cologne. None of that is Kolsch. That's a blonde ale with extra hops in. So yeah, the Kolsch is a slightly different style, but I think I've got a broad palette. I've judged loads of beer competitions like World Beer Cup, Great American Beer Festival, and had this travel experience. So I feel like I've got these reference points in my kind of taste palette somewhere, and I feel like I can make reasonable judgments and say I like this because, or I would argue that it's not so much this style because of that. So yeah, for me in a book like this, it's about kind of educating and guiding the taste and saying like, I think this because.
All right. I guess I'm going to go ahead and jump back in here. There was, let me see, because where was I? I had a question like I was going to lose it. Okay. Yes. So obviously with this book, the new craft beer world, you wrote the first one back in 2012, or rather it was published in 2012, I guess. Now you've noted in the newest one that, the evolution of beer is, making the original one a bit obsolete, which is where you have to go with making this one. Does that mean then we're going to see another one of these in 9 years? It's just the way that the evolution of beer is going, that this is just going to be, it's just somewhat proving that beer is so evolutionary that it is going to continually change how we perceive beer in the next decade.
Yeah, and this is the constant challenge of writing books like this. And I think one of the things I note in the introduction is that for me, it works as a snapshot. So this is beer now. So this is not necessarily beer in 2019. This is not necessarily beer in 2025. This is kind of as I'm seeing and tasting beer now. But it will change. And that's the exciting thing about beer, that it's always changing. There's always these new styles. If I'd have written, well, it was interesting actually to go back through the original Craft Beer World book and see the styles that are in there and the styles that just aren't in there. To see that great evolution. So yeah, I wrote it over the summer of 2012, and it came out, the following spring. So this is a long time ago, and beer moves so quickly. Who'd have thought that 5 years ago, hazy IPAs would be brewed everywhere around the world? Who'd have thought fruited sour beers would be, on tap in every craft beer bar in the world? Like it's remarkable to see that, and it amazes me to think what might come next. We've always thinking at the end of every year, like, oh, what's coming next? And no one ever gets it right because it's impossible to predict it. Like right. Seltzer, like where the hell did that come from? Hard seltzer.
So we still don't know. And the way things are going right now with how it's going on with Boston Beer Co., it's kind of making it seem like seltzers are not going to make it. I don't know.
They'll make it.
That I don't know.
They won't make it in England. It's not happening in the UK.
It's
not. And actually, that actually was going to be a question. I'm curious why would it not make it there?
It's interesting. I've been tracking it for a couple of years, just seeing what's happening. And if I go in my local supermarket, so the big major superstore, There's seltzers on all of the shelves, and even the small supermarkets, just almost like the corner shop, like Tesco's, whatever. They've got hard seltzer now, but I don't know who's buying it, and I don't know why they're buying it. We've long had a culture for young drinkers, so probably just before the legal drinking age, 16, 17, and then beyond, to buy ready-made drinks. So they're always used to be very sweet, about 5%. But everyone liked them because they tasted like soda, but they were a bit alcoholic. And we've got so many of these ready-made gin and tonics, ready-made whiskey sodas, all of these different drinks, mojitos in cans, all of that stuff. I believe that they are way more popular than hard seltzer just because they taste of stuff. I think a lot of the popularity of seltzer is the calorie side of it, kind of the low carb, low calories. But I really think in the UK that no one cares about that. I don't think anyone sits down and thinks, okay, well, I'm going to choose this drink which doesn't taste of much because it's only 97 calories over this drink which tastes of lots, which is 153 calories. Like, I don't think anyone is making that distinction. In the UK, we tend to drink, certainly on beer, we tend to drink much more by alcohol percentage. So it's very common to be standing at a bar. It was just last week or so. I was just standing at the bar ordering a pint, and someone came up. There were, let's say there's 10 beers on tap, and they said, can I have a pint of your weakest beer? So they didn't care what the style was. They didn't care what the brand was. Didn't care anything. They just wanted the lowest alcohol content. And that was how they ordered their beer. So I think it's just a different drinking culture that we have here. I think favors flavor and lower alcohol over calories and stuff which doesn't taste as much.
We have enough that tastes like water as it is. Wendy?
That kind of leads to another question. So you spoke about the lower age for drinking there. Do you think that we have too high of an age limit? What is your opinion on that? Do we need to lower our drinking age?
I think it's a really good question. And I think the trouble with making it 21 is, no one's not drinking at 17. I'm sure kids still are having beers at 17. They're just doing it illegally, and they're doing it when they shouldn't. And that makes it then like feel like you're doing something really bad. This is 4 years or 5 years ahead of when I should be able to do this. So then I think that lacks the respect. I think if you look at any of the Central European drinking cultures, the legal drinking age is much lower, or it's just not really enforced. I've been in German beer gardens where there were, boys probably 10, 12 years old drinking a half litre of Radler. So half a beer, half a lemonade, and they're just drinking it because it's a really important part of the culture there. So they grow up with this respect for it. Whereas I feel something like 21, you don't grow up with that respect for it. You just grow up with this, fuck that, I'm going to get drunk. Let's just go hard drinking. It makes sense in some way because alcohol is kind of bad for you if you don't treat it respectfully. But at the same time, everyone's going to drink it anyway. So I don't see why 21, it seems too high.
Well, here in Michigan, yeah, I love that point. Here in Michigan, we at least where we are in Michigan, the legal drinking age, we always say it's 19 because the Canadian border is usually within 10 minutes of us, depending on how long it takes to get across the border. So a lot of us growing up, me, Rob, and Wendy, we could, go over there. To cross the border, all you needed was a birth certificate at that time, and you could go there, get drunk, come back, and, it was all legal. For us, I don't think I ever really heard the point of respecting the alcohol, respecting the drink. And I think that is definitely a newfound understanding, because a lot of us here in America, we always say, you're old enough to die for your country, you should be old enough to drink. And that's kind of a thing. And for me, I personally, as much as I'd love to lower the drinking age, I always been like, if you sign up for the military, you should get carte blanche. You could smoke, you can drink, you can do whatever the hell you want. Meth, go for it. I don't care. Just don't do it while holding a gun. That's another topic, another show, we're talking beer here. Go on, Wendy.
I do want to interrupt real quick and point out, Ken, that when I was 19 going over to Canada, I believe it was actually 18 that we were allowed to drink over there.
Oh.
And I only needed my driver's license. I didn't need a birth certificate to go across the border.
Yeah, I mean, it is September 12th. 2021, so I think things changed when I turned 18, 19, that's for sure. I want to ask you a fun little question before we kind of round out the rest of the show. So I definitely stalked your Instagram, and I noticed that you recently ran a 100K. First of all, what is that in miles? Because unlike the rest of the world, we don't understand metric system.
Thanks, Reagan.
Why did you do it? And obviously, I have to ask, what was the beer that you had to celebrate the finish, or drink, I should say?
So it was just over 100 kilometers. It was 63 and a half miles. And I've done a few ultra marathons before, and I just wanted to go a bit further. So I wanted, 100 kilometers, 100 of anything seems like a good thing to attempt. So yeah, I just wanted to see if I could do it. Is it possible? And for me, beer is one part of my life, but not drinking is a really big part of it. And when I'm not drinking, a lot of the time I'm out running. I mentioned at the beginning, we just moved to the sea, and we're right by a massive national park. So many trails, over some wonderful white cliffs. It's beautiful. So yeah, I wanted that challenge. I've run loads of marathons. I was like, can I run like 2.5 marathons? The beer at the end, I actually had a beer the next day. I couldn't face a beer that night. The trouble with, running that far is, you'd think you'd just be really, really hungry. But it's almost the opposite. Like almost everyone that does ultra marathons, their guts are just like they can't handle anymore. I have to eat 2,000 or 3,000 calories while I'm running. That's quite hard to do. So yeah, I drank a lot the next day.
I mean, I'm guessing that's probably why I don't run so much, is because I drink so much. And you say that if you're not drinking, you're running, but I'm always drinking, so I can't be running. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. We always finish the show. All of us will ask you one more final question, then we'll give you the opportunity to kind of make sure everyone knows where they can get your books. So we're going to start with Wendy here.
So I've asked a few times about your favorite things. So what is something that you would suggest people try that they wouldn't think to try on their own?
Good question. I think, given the fact that I've just written a book about beer and vegetarian and vegan food, I think for me that would be something I would say. We default to meat, and I don't think we need to. Let's kind of ignoring the environmental and all of those issues. I think there is so much excitement and so much good food, and it doesn't need to have meat in it. And some of the food and beer pairings I've had from that are so good. I tell you a great one for you, Ken. Brown ale with roasted cauliflower. So roasted cauliflower, tahini is like a sesame paste. Try those two things together. Brown ale, roasted cauliflower, tahini is unbelievable. I drank and I combined that combination so much last year when I was working on the book. So yeah, I think enjoy beers with different foods and actually eat a bit broader and kind of experiment a bit more with that. That's a fun thing while we're at home a little bit more often.
I'll definitely write that down and try it, because I do love all that. But for me, I'm not a big fan of drinking while I'm eating. I am that kind of person where I need like a stop. Like if the food comes to my table, I eat the food and then I go back to the beer. It's just a weird thing for me. I don't know if it's because some of the beers, a lot of the porters and brown ales and stuff definitely leave a long lingering taste in your mouth, and I don't want to necessarily, as much as people say it enhances the food for a lot of food, for me I don't want to mix it. But Rob, what about you? What's your final question?
So I was kind of browsing through the beer bucket list. My question isn't on that. It was just kind of a comment, was that the one thing I definitely will probably not do is go to Cantillon. And that's only because I cannot hang with lambics. I've tried, but they are just way too, just too sour. I can't handle them. But earlier you were talking about Kolsch's, and I guess I have to pull this question after former host Matt Bush's playbook. Kolsch's with adjuncts, yay or nay?
Oh, absolutely nay. That is not a Kolsch. That is something completely different. Yeah, 100% nay. Couldn't be more nay.
So you're saying the watermelon Kolsch I saw yesterday isn't a Kolsch?
Yeah, that's disgusting. If you tell me it's a watermelon blonde ale, yeah, I'll drink it. I'll drink loads of it. But tell me that's a watermelon Kolsch, no, I'm not even going to go in that brewery. I would refuse to, just on principle.
Now I need to know how you feel about white stouts.
Oh no, I don't have as strong feelings about white stouts, but I have zero interest in drinking a white stout.
Coffee ale.
A coffee blonde ale. Yeah. Nah. I'm all for innovation. I love innovation. I love seeing what's next. But there's novelty, and then there's there's good beer, and then there's beers which I think are trying to be something that they're not. And yeah, I'm all for like different labels and different ways of describing beers, but white stout, nah.
All right. Well, I am going to finish the show. I got one question. You seem like a very opinionated person, so I'm going to love to hear this response from you. In the United States, we discuss a lot what is craft beer. Obviously, the Brewers Association has their definition, and a lot of people take that definition very loose because maybe they grew up in Michigan and Founders is no longer craft beer to the BA, but it's still craft beer to them. Same happened with Goose Island or Elysian. So what is, your book is called New Craft Beer World, says it right there in the title. What is craft beer to those in the UK, those around the world, but then what is craft beer to you?
Yeah, well, good question. I think it's the unanswerable question. No matter how much I try to think about the answer to it, there is never an easy answer. And in a way, I kind of just want to give like a wishy-washy answer that's like, it's the beers that you enjoy to drink, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't need this label. I think as the more people that drink beer, and the more that they enjoy it, and the more that they actually think about it, the more that I think that's a great thing. Like if they're sitting down and they're just pounding PBRs or whatever, they're not thinking, that doesn't really matter. But if someone's sitting down and they're drinking a Founders, or they're drinking an Elysian, or they're drinking Goose Island, or in the UK we have Camden Town Brewery, we have Beavertown. If they're drinking that and they're engaging with it and they're enjoying it, that's great. That's a really good thing, and that to me is all that matters. If someone says, I really like drinking this beer, I'm never going to be that guy that's like, that's not craft beer. You shouldn't like that anymore. And to me, that's just absolutely not the right way of thinking. So for me, craft beer brings people in. It catches people. It catches their imagination, and they see it as something different. It's a really interesting thing in the UK in that, basically every small batch beer, or every beer is pretty much craft beer. If you exclude maybe the macro lagers. So even the biggest cask ale producers, you're pretty much you're calling that craft beer. It takes a lot of work, there's a lot of skill to make good cask ale. But I think in the UK, most drinkers see craft beer as the keg stuff. So the IPA, the hoppy IPAs, things like that. And they don't necessarily see it as being the cask ales, which seems like a slightly unusual thing. Or they only see it as the colourful cans in the beer store. That's craft beer. This is cask ale. This is lager. So there is this like, I don't know. They lack these distinctions, and that's for me is where craft beer is such a hard term, because it brings people in, but then people like get confused. They're like, well, what's that one? Is that craft or not craft? So yeah, it's a difficult one in the US. I mean, I don't think I would even want to answer that question. That's just like, I'll leave that one to you guys. Because it is now getting so muddied because of how many bigger breweries are involved, and how that then grows.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been under the impression we have a brewery in Michigan, and if you want to use this comment later, we'll make sure we tell you the brewery that gave it to us. But it's North Center Brewing, and their slogan this is what they built their brewery on, and it says, "If you like it, it's a good beer." And I think that is what a lot more people need to understand and appreciate within the craft beer world, is that if you like it, it's a good beer, and if you don't like it, that doesn't mean it's bad. Everyone.
Good beer, somebody else.
Yeah, I don't like IPAs, but that doesn't mean Too Hearted is bad. Just because I don't like it, I'd get crucified for saying that in like a public forum, that I don't think Too Hearted is good. But that's the thing, is that if you like it, it's a good beer. There's no reason to define it, to be honest. As much as we're putting you on the spot, it is a podcast. We're here to entertain. But I think you just need to, people just need to enjoy what they're drinking and drink what they enjoy. So, Mark, your books, where can we find them, and when is the new Craft Beer World coming out?
I have no idea when it's coming out, but I think it's soon. It's it's the middle of October, as far as I know. Middle of October, 2021. It is distributed around the US, or it's going to be available online. It will definitely be on Amazon if people like buying there. If people don't, it will be in bookshops. And yeah, you can get. I think all of my books are available online.
Yep, it's October 12th, 2021. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes so that you can hop onto Mark Dredge's Amazon account to see all the books that he has, including the beer and veg. Is that straight vegetarian or vegan?
It's both.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know for those who are interested. I want to ask one more question, just because it came to my mind and I thought about it. What was the... I know you guys aren't Ireland, but you're closer to Ireland than we are. But when Guinness changed from their filtration system from one way to another to finally make Guinness vegan, was that a big change for you, or did you have it before because you didn't, you kind of looked past that? Like, what was that for you?
It didn't really have an impact on me. I'm not a strict vegan when it comes to things like that. When it comes to beer, I kind of don't like lactose in my beer too much, but I'm not fussed about cask ale. My local cask ale brewers will almost certainly be using isinglass, which is made from fish swim bladder. But if someone got a mackerel out the sea and dipped it in my beer, I'd be a bit like, nah, I don't really fancy that now. But just the isinglass, I'm not going to be strict about something like that. But it seemed to, influence a few people's decisions, and they were happy with that. But yeah, I'm not too bothered about it.
Thank you so much, Mark Dredge. At Mark Dredge on Instagram, you can follow him for his beer and running very long distances journeys. We appreciate you joining. Stay tuned if you're listening live. We're going to be going over the news next. But that's going to do it for Better on Draft 267. My name is Ken with Wendy and Rob. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Peace.